But we begin with some news and headlines. And look, this time of the year in October is just littered with injury reports, notable players missing time. But for some reason, it feels like it is almost unusual with the significant quarterbacks who are dealing with injuries. And I don't know why it feels like all of them are dealing with shoulder injuries. We got to get a hold of people's shoulders. We need to strengthen the shoulders of our quarterbacks in college football. So obviously Bryce Young did not play in that 24-20 Alabama win against Texas A&M. Devin Leary was knocked out of NC State's narrow win against Florida State. Jalon Daniels was knocked out of the narrow loss against TCU for Kansas. Will Levis did not play for Kentucky in Kentucky's loss to South Carolina. KJ Jefferson did not play in Arkansas's loss to Mississippi State. And Dillon Gabriel was knocked out of, that wasn't a shoulder, that was a concussion protocol, was knocked out of he warmed up but did not play, correct?
Right. Yeah. They tried to pull that whole fakery stuff. Like, he wasn't cleared. I think it was pretty obvious the way like certain Sooner insiders were treating, like, maybe this will happen. Like, okay.
So
he's not going.
Dillon Gabriel did a play that was as dramatic as any Oklahoma fan could hope for. So let's sort of look at this group here, right? And if there's another one that I'm missing,
Malik Cunningham. And Virginia lost to them by 3 scores.
Tommy DeVito.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Quarterbacks.
They're dying.
Soft. These kids are soft nowadays. No, I kid. It does seem like it's a bad luck year. The head injuries are one thing, like Dillon Gabriel, especially after what happened to Tua on the national stage. I mean, everybody outside of, even the NFL, but college football was paying attention to that too. There's a hyper awareness towards the concussion issue. So no one's going to get rushed back. That's one. The other ones, and I do wonder, I wonder with Bryce Young, with Quinn Ewers, who came back, I wonder if the coaches are even more cautious with their star quarterbacks, and maybe they could have played earlier, and they're saying, you know what, let's just take it the safe route. Let's see if we can get it done without him and get him back at 100%. I think it does a couple things. One, I think it tells the player, like, we care about your future, because these are quarterbacks that have plans on playing at the next level. And it also sends a message to your team, like, hey, we got to kind of dial it up a little bit this week and get a little bit even more focused versus an opponent that maybe you didn't think so. But I think it's probably more is the ultra cautious nature of everybody in college football right now, with the concussions and with other issues too.
What we need is Jerome Boger working every single college football game to make sure that nobody touches the quarterback at all. Because of that way, yeah. Sorry to bring NFL up, but the roughing the passer call on Tom Brady yesterday.
That was ridiculous.
Incredible.
So we'll start with Bryce Young then. Are we expecting Bryce Young back for Tennessee? It is the SEC on CBS Game of the Week. It is a battle of undefeateds. This is the best team. Well, these are 2 of the 3 best teams in the SEC. I don't know how everybody would stack them up. Maybe that's your own opinion. Is Bryce Young back for Tennessee?
Yes.
I think so.
I don't think there's any doubt here. Like, look at the line. I mean, some of these lines out there this week, I think, are hedges, right? But this Bama one is not. Bama is laying, what's the rotation number on this? 121? Okay, yeah. So it's 121 on your board. They're laying 7.5. There's no way in hell they're laying 7.5. If Vegas didn't know that Bryce Young was playing, this line would be 3.5 or 4, because it would be a hedge between, kind of what it is. If they thought he was not playing, the line would probably be like 1 or pick. He's playing. I'd be shocked if he doesn't, given this number. Like, they're not going to be 7.5 points off. They know.
Okay, so what about KJ Jefferson? Because
that's actually an interesting one.
Arkansas plays BYU this week. Arkansas is kind of leaking a little bit of fuel. And look, BYU needs to get this win, because we might get to this in a pun further review. We might not, but like, BYU, a team that we were really excited about early in the season, is very close to sort of, falling into this outside the top 30, outside the top 40, not irrelevance. We're still going to talk about you, especially when the performances are worth it and you get a lot of late night spotlights, but it is far from the type of Cougars narrative that we had at the beginning of the season. Both these teams have a lot to gain. What do we think about KJ Jefferson? What is the severity of that? And can Arkansas beat BYU if Jefferson doesn't go?
Can it? Yes. Would I be highly confident? No, because I mean, BYU, what's at the core of their struggles lately is their defense was kind of soft all season long, and it's just kind of coming home to roost the last few weeks against some good teams. So Arkansas might still, even without KJ Jefferson, be able to take advantage of that. Of course, the other side of that is Arkansas has got some defensive weaknesses of its own, and BYU got back a couple of key players on offense this week. So I think Arkansas can beat BYU without KJ Jefferson. I just think it's very much a coin flip at best for them.
What do y'all think?
I mean, I think that he has a chance to play, but Tom is really right about the defensive injuries that they're facing right now. To me, that's the biggest thing, is that Arkansas just has a bunch of guys down on defense, and I would expect BYU, to score 35 plus, maybe 40. Right, that's a tough travel spot too. I mean, Arkansas has had a difficult slate here. They just ran all over the field trying to cover Mississippi State. Then prior to that, they played Bama, which was kind of soul crushing because Bama lost their quarterback and they still lost that game to them. And then they had the game against Texas A&M there in Dallas. This is a tough spot for them. Now somebody's got to get off the mat. I think BYU is properly favored in this one, but I think Jefferson could play. The other thing is, like, Arkansas wasted about 20 minutes of that ball game playing the other kid instead of Hornsby. And I'm not a huge fan of Hornsby as a thrower, but as a runner, he's really dynamic. And we have seen Kendall Briles-led offenses take a runner before and have a lot of success. The most notable example here that Chip will recall is when Briles was at Baylor. They were all out of quarterbacks for that bowl game, I think against UNC, right?
Yep.
And they ran for like 400 or 500 yards.
Yep.
That's what, when they were using Hornsby, that's what that game reminded me of. So I think Arkansas will score some points too. I think they can push BYU around. I don't know if Arkansas can get any stops.
Don't, if you see a quarterback dressing on the sidelines, warming up for one game, that you would probably see him the next? I mean, I guess you can't assume anything today's game, but I felt like KJ was close to playing this week, so he would be able to go the following week. But
yeah,
that's wild speculation.
I mean, well, listen, and this is stepping way out of bounds, but I don't read Sam Pittman as somebody that would be trying to play those games, right? Because he told Ryan McGee before the game, hey, well, I don't know. We'll see. We're going to go out there and we're going to give it a go. So I'm expecting KJ Jefferson to play in this game and double dose of Tar Heel right here. Cade Fortin, the quarterback who they started his career as a Larry Fedora product. He was in there near the bottoming out of the Fedora era, went to South Florida. This is his third stop so far in college football as he is with the Razorbacks. But Hornsby, as you mentioned, Bud, much more effective. Yep.
I do want to point out that we have 15 years ago, we had a season that is largely regarded as the craziest season in the history of college football, right? 2007. It was just totally wild. And there's a lot of wild things that happen. But I remember when we wrote about this at SB Nation, like a long time ago, a lot of this was actually predicated on quarterback injury. So if you look at this, John David Booty was the quarterback of USC that year. They started out number 1. He gets hurt and misses the Oregon game, which they lost. And he also broke his finger against Stanford. That USC team was extremely talented. They only lost 2 games. And a lot of it was they didn't have their starting quarterback. Matt Flynn was really dinged up and had to leave the game against Kentucky, which they lost in overtime, and also against Arkansas, which they lost in overtime. If you look at this, Pat White missed a half, against Pitt, which they lost, and he missed a half against USF, which I think they also lost, right? So, Pat White was a really dynamic guy. There was a couple other dudes as well in this one. Tebow would get banged up, but he still won the Heisman and played really well. And then was it Dixon? Dennis Dixon played the game they lost at Arizona when he came out in the knee brace, and is he visibly collapsed on the field. So if they start piling up, they really can impact the playoff race in the national picture. It's weird that we have this many. They're not really at the very top of the sport, I guess, but we've seen a weird season before, largely, or not largely, at least in part as a result of a lot of quarterback injuries.
I think you're staring it right in the face and you don't see it.
What?
You mentioned it. Who was USC's starting quarterback at the start of 2007?
John David Booty.
Who's Oklahoma's backup QB in 2020?
General Booty.
General.
The Booty principle is leading to crazy seasons. Any year in which your quarterbacks are injured and one of them is named Booty, weird stuff is going to happen.
Will Levis is not dealing with a shoulder injury. He has a foot, and that was his absence played a role in the 24-14 loss to South Carolina. Kentucky is playing Mississippi State at home this weekend. Do you think that we will see Will Levis back? And if he's back, and how much does his absence or availability impact your read on that game?
A lot. I mean, I know we give Will Levis a lot of crap for being, chosen by so many as the number one pick in the NFL draft, but I think it was pretty obvious in that game against South Carolina. The drop off from Levis to who else Kentucky has on that roster was pretty stark. And I mean, Kaya Sharon was 15 to 27, 178 yards, 2 touchdowns, an interception. Not really the running threat that Levis is. If they don't have him against that Mississippi State team, which did just put up 40 on Arkansas and has looked pretty solid all season long, I don't think Kentucky's beating the Bulldogs. They're going to be 4-3. They need Levis back to have any chance of winning that game.
You know what? All this is pretty revealing, and it's pretty obvious, but still, I think it's harder than ever, is the depth at quarterback is almost impossible to build, because if you have 2 good quarterbacks, one of them's going to leave. They lose. Yeah. So like the drop off is pretty dramatic in a lot of these programs, and it makes it really tough.
No doubt about it. I will also say that they lost one of the transfers they took at receiver to an injury in that game. He didn't return. And then their really fast guy who scored on the, I think that was him. Basically, I think Kentucky's down its top 2 receivers also who did not return to the game. So you may have Sharon and a bunch of dudes who are not really SEC quality with an offensive line that's sketch. I think Vegas thinks he is not playing, by the way, because currently Mississippi State is a 7 and maybe going to the 7.5 point favorite in
Lexington.
Lay it.
Yeah, like
lay it.
That thing opened 3 and it was to 7 within about an hour or 2. To me, that says somebody knows something. And
if you look back to last week, Kentucky was like an 11-point favorite when the line was originally posted against South Carolina, and that thing had just shrunk down to 4.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, 11.5 for it. Levis over Sharon after seeing Sharon is probably like a 6-point adjustment, maybe 7. And those 2 receivers, it's sort of a snowball effect.